Hey YouTube, how's it going? In today's video, we're going to be checking out the Alienware R7. It has a 12700H RTX 3070 Ti, 16GB of DDR5 Ram. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, join the 1% of my viewers who are. The support means the world to me. Alright, so the build is all plastic but feels very sturdy. The hinges feel good, pretty minimal screen wobble. The keyboard deck has a sort of soft touch rubber going on that I personally enjoyed. I thought it was comfortable under the wrist while typing. On the back, you have the RGB Alienware logo, and of course the signature Alienware Dice-esque exhaust with a RGB light around it. The weight comes in at 2.6 kilograms for the laptop, and 3.4 kilograms with the 240 watt charger. Technically the heaviest among the last 3 full-size laptops I've reviewed, but you probably won't notice the extra 80 grams. For ports on the right side, you have 2 USB-A 3.2 ports. On the rear, you have a USB-C port that's Thunderbolt 4 on every model except for the 3050 Ti, another USB-A port, HDMI, and the power port. I want to point out that the power barrel doesn't go completely into the power port. I don't think it's really necessarily a problem, but the first few times I hooked it up, I kept trying to push it in harder, thinking it wasn't in all the way. On the left, we just have the Ethernet port and the headphone jack. So yeah, on my specific model, the keyboard is per key RGB, but it's not the mechanical keyboard option, and there's also a cheaper single zone RGB option. On the right, you have volume keys and a mic mute button. On the top, if you hit function and F1, it puts it into full speed mode. F2 through F5 are reserved for programmable hotkeys. F7 cycles through your, turns your keyboard lighting on and off. Inside the Alienware Command Center, you have access to overclocking. You can also choose between the different performance profiles. The performance mode and full speed mode are pretty similar in performance, just the full speed mode locks the fans at max. In the FX tab, you can adjust your per key RGB and the color of the Alienware logo and light bar on the back. Alright, so the laptop does have advanced Optimus, and also in the BIOS, you have access to a mux switch, which is nice because in my personal experience with advanced Optimus, it can be a bit wonky when you're using an external monitor and not really function correctly. Also in the BIOS, you get some other really cool options like battery conservation, TCC offset, which basically lets you customize your throttle temperature in case you're the kind of person that sees 90 degrees on the CPU and gets concerned. My biggest question here though is why do you need to go into the BIOS to access some of these things? At a minimum, they could at least put the mux switch in the command center. The screen on my model is a 240Hz, 1440p, 300 nit IPS panel with an advertised 2 millisecond response time in G-Sync. There's a cheaper 1080p 165Hz 3 millisecond option and a more esports-esque focused 360Hz 1 millisecond response time 1080p option. I unfortunately lost my screenshot showing the color gamut, but I do remember it was 99% sRGB and maybe like 70% DCI-P3. Now, I would normally keep a laptop well past its return date to thoroughly review it and use it, and I would just be able to do this again, but I returned it. And why I returned it leads us right into our next topic, battery life. I was lucky to get 2 hours of battery life out of the Alienware streaming YouTube at 40% brightness and screen set at 60 Hz. For comparison, the Helios 300 with the same i7-12700H lasted 9.5 hours. I went through tons of troubleshooting steps, made sure every single driver in the BIOS was up to date, and no weird background processes were drawing power. The problem was, even with every single program closed, some gremlin was telling it to draw power that it needed to ramp up to 40 watts constantly and idle. It would occasionally drop back down to like 10 watts battery drain, which is what you would expect at idle and battery saver mode, then shoot right back up. I do think this is hopefully an isolated problem because I watched some other reviewers and they didn't report abnormally short battery life. And I did have one other problem, which is that the Thunderbolt port that was supposed to support power delivery according to Alienware didn't. I tested it, at least not with my 100 watt and a 65 watt USB-C charger that I have lying around. So if you've got this laptop, let me know in the comments below how long your laptop lasts on battery life and if you can charge it through USB-C. Alright, let's move on to thermals. Running Cinebench for 20 minutes, we see CPU temps around 78 degrees with the i7-12700H pulling 75 watts with fans at about 55 decibels. Running Unique Haven benchmark for 20 minutes, the GPU's pulling 140 watts no problem at 80 degrees and the fans are up to about 57 decibels. While actually gaming when in performance mode, fan noise is at 55 degrees with the CPU and GPU temp very acceptable in the low 80s. Using the F1 hotkey to put it in the full speed mode doesn't really give you any extra performance. It does lower your temps down into the 70s at the expense of 61 decibels fan noise. In 3D Mark Time Spy, if you care about that, it gets a score of 12,131. In Cinebench R23, it takes second place to the i7-12700H and the Acer Helios 300 with the same processor, a multi-core score of 18,041 and a single-core score of 1741. Now I've already done a video showing this laptop in 6 games at 1080p and 1440p, so we're only going to look at 2 benchmarks. First is Cyberpunk 2077, where the Alienware is my first laptop that you're going to be able to ray trace at 1080p probably without needing to turn on DLSS. I got an average of 56 frames per second. Next we'll look at Assassin's Creed Valhalla at 1440p. The Alienware gets 73 frames per second using the game's built-in benchmark at the highest graphics settings preset. And like I said, if you want to see how this performs in more games, I'll have a link to the video where you can see it compared directly to the 6700M actually. 6 games, 1080p and 1440p. So in America, the MSRP before tax for this configuration of the R7 is around $2,100. I've seen it on sale down to close to the $1,800 range. It pretty much matches price to the near identical spec Helios 300 from Best Buy, but you can pretty readily find a Legion 5 Pro with RTX 3070 Ti for around $1,600, which is probably going to be a better choice overall, at least here in America at our prices. So to summarize, I was a fan of the keyboard and typing experience. The 1440p screen has good color accuracy and felt responsive in use, the only minor drawback being it's only 300 nits. Temperatures and gaming performance were good, with the fan noise being about average. I do really wish it came with at least like one more USB-C port. Having only 4 total USB ports in a full-size gaming laptop in 2022 is a little inadequate. Assuming the issues I experienced were isolated, overall I think it's a pretty solid gaming machine, especially if you enjoy the very gamery aesthetic. Ultimately, though, like I said, depending on sale prices and what the prices look like in your region, I would probably err towards the Legion 5 Pro or even the AMD Advantage Legion 7 if you weren't overly concerned with ray tracing capability. So that's all I got. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you have this machine, make sure you leave comments down below, letting the other viewers know how much you like it.